Hi. I wanted to talk about a relationship, divinely inspired relationship in general, and this longing and desire that we have to be with another. And I'm really sitting with the divine partnership and this divinely inspired longing that we have to be in relationship with another, to be in union with another, and where that inspiration comes from. When we look at inspiration, that is often coming from an object, even a thought. Maybe it's something we see, and that connects us with this sublime reality that coexists with us, but beyond form or physical, that initiates in us a certain opening to expand into something more. So this inspiration that's creative allows us to feel and be something more, feel into something more than before. It's beautiful in relationship as well, whether that's a friendship or a partnership. When we're with another and we're open and available, where inspiration takes us in a very co-creative process is infinite. It's often, though, that in relationship, and now I'm going to speak to more around partnership or even relationship where we actually are still, maybe we're married, and whether it's new or we've been in it longer, this still applies. We have this idea of what we want in relationship. And this idea comes from a very divine and inspired place within us. And maybe when we meet somebody, that inspiration takes us and we consider that indeed we are more with this person than we are by ourselves. That is the beauty of love. That is the beauty of seeing another as ourselves and becoming a part of a whole, seeing the sum adding to ourselves and becoming more of ourselves. So love is very inspiring in these ways, to be able to see and become more of ourselves. The trap that I see often happening is when we forget that we are already whole and perfect as we are. That we don't necessarily need the other in these common ways that we think that we need the other. If not the needing of the other coming from a place of divine recognition of that within the other, to awaken that within ourselves that we already are. So to be able to see the divine in the other, those things within them that inspire us to see ourselves more fully. And that's a divine gift. Now, two people doing that, being open and available, can inspire each other continually into greater and greater versions of expansion and more of themselves. And that is the beauty of being in union, in partnership, is we're inspired divinely to become more than what we were on our own, apart. So in this unifying process, which is a process, we become more of ourselves. But to become, we must also go through the process of purification to also undo that which isn't. And we often, I find, get stuck in that purification process because we as individuals want so much to have what we want. We want so much to be in the inspired stage or state without undoing ourselves, without becoming the no thing, or the demolition of old versions of ourselves that would take us away from who we were to become more of who we are. So it's a very deep inner correction of old, outdated thinking into newer versions, more expanded states, more possibilities. It's like old skins becoming new skins to hold more. So this newness has to happen so that we can be in the new being, becoming, and letting the old versions go. So we really have to, in a way, die or be reborn so that we can be in this fresh state of inspired action, inspired seeing. You can imagine that anything that gets stuck can't be inspired. Anything that like runs through the mud and starts to get clogged is in time going to not function the same. It's not going to feel the same. It's not going to have the same aliveness. And it's in this aliveness, in this freshness and newness, in this love that is inspired by itself, within itself, that we come to know ourselves. So while we're in union and in partnership, whether that's a marriage or a coupling, each individual is going to come to this crucible within themselves of all of the different stories that they've held that aren't serving their greatest, highest good, that must be undone for something else to come and take place so that the coupling can grow closer as well. So that as individuals, as sovereign individuals in communion with God, with Source, inspired to know themselves more and more as an individual that is still apart from the coupling, their own journey of self-awareness, of self-discovery, of God realization will inspire them to go deeper into all the superficial things that arise in the world and come to know themselves better, know the world better within themselves as we continually surrender the limitations that are imposed upon and created and perpetuated, give those back up, and we become greater than we were by the surrendering of those things. That impacts then our partner, our couple. It impacts the world. It impacts our workplace. It impacts everything around us because the arising within impacts that without. Another partner that you partner with doing the same thing, living in truth, living in the desire to be a greater version of themselves, doesn't mean that they know what that is, but unraveling and undoing that, purifying themselves through the surrendering process, both will grow closer together. They cannot help but do that because the purification makes space for more of God. So the removing of that which isn't makes room for that which is. So this inspiration that happens in partnership, this divine union, this that we long for and desire, often is coming to us through hardship, because we're needing to surrender our pride of the thought that we know to the realization that we don't, so that we can be filled by something that does. And this patterning of selfishness of the small self is surrendered to this larger embodiment of knowing that does know. And in the process of purification, we grow more fully in trust, in faith within ourselves. We start to see that indeed the world does take care of us, but it's that same world that paradoxically we're letting go of and surrendering within ourselves that generates the space for more of God in us, that is more full of trust and faith and all of these sublime things that are alive, that were seeming to be alive outside of us, now dwell within us. So we, by doing this, bring more of heaven within earth, within ourselves, where we no longer have conflicts in those similar ways. The conflicts that we seem to have that arise within us are those desires that we seem to want to continue to have of our small selves, of our selfish self that doesn't want to give up itself for the world, for God, for a greater self. We want these things. We want these thoughts that are apart from the whole. We want to maintain a individual idea of ourselves apart from the whole or the universal truth of who we are in a greater reality that actually is in harmony with the whole. So for relationships then to really work, there is a need for us to understand that respecting and honoring God within us and our path and our journey allows us to respect and honor another, that light within us that can see the light in another. But that's by doing the purification process of self-undoing, of identification undoing, where we realize I am not who I think. I am not the thinker. So the more undoing that I do, the more space I have for true, authentic partnership, which means that partnership will go through phases of conflict. It must. It's part of the process of growing together, growing apart and growing together. So making space for repair and reconciliation is just as important, because within our humanity, for the divine to grow within our humanity and to become more cultivated, we have to be able to outgrow our skins, to be able to remove our clothes and grow into greater clothes, almost, skins, and mature. That's not going to happen through the idealized world, that that happens in the realm of idea, but for us to make it manifest, we must embody it. So it's no longer an idea which we can extrapolate and live beautifully in the world of potential, but for us to actually know it without a shadow of doubt. The embodiment happens. It must happen. It must arise within us, and us live it as truth. So, conflict is natural. To stay in conflict is not. To stay in conflict is to lose our connection with something that's much more sublime. And what's the value? Do we want love? Do we want to stay in love, or do we want to be right? And who is the one that has the need to be right? Or who is in love? And although they both can coincide together, where does our posturing stem from? Is it the whole of us in love, or is it a part of us in conflict? Thank you for being with me.